So before we start with the market structures, we're first going to look at efficiency. And the reason that we do efficiency first is because after we finish the market structures, we judge the market and evaluate them if they're good or bad based on their efficiency. So the first type of efficiency is allocative efficiency.
Mhm.
Allocative efficiency tells us if consumer and producer surplus, so total welfare, so that's consumer and producer surplus, is maximized.
Mhm.
This happens when MC equals
Equals M.
AR.
Yeah.
MC equals AR. Okay. You can think of it as supply equals demand. So
Mm.
it's like your market equilibrium from year 12. For all of these
Mm.
efficiencies, you should know a worded definition and a mathematical definition. So allocative efficiency is when total welfare is maximized. So that's consumer and producer surplus is as high as it possibly could be.
Mm-hmm.
That happens when MC equals AR. Okay.
Oh. Mm.
The next one is productive efficiency. Productive efficiency is when average costs are as low as they possibly can be. This happens at the bottom of the average cost curve.
AC. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the bottom of the AC curve, MC goes through. So it's when MC equals AC.
Mm.
The next one is dynamic efficiency. And that's when there are supernormal profits, specifically in the long run. Okay. If there are supernormal profits in the short run, it wouldn't make a difference. There has to be supernormal profits in the long run. And then they can be reinvested. And then that leads to improvements.
Mm.
Cool. And then the last one is X inefficiency. X inefficiency is when the firm is purposely not productively efficient. So it's when they are choosing not to be productively efficient because maybe they can maximize profits where they're not productively efficient. Okay, so like a monopoly would be productively inefficient, but also X inefficient. They don't need to be productively efficient to maximize profit. Let's move on to the first market structure, which is perfect competition. The characteristics of perfect competition are many buyers and
There's
sellers,
no barriers to entry and exit, and everyone had perfect information.
good free entry and exit, perfect information, identical or homogeneous products, um, and firms are price takers. Basically, they can't set their own price. They have to take the price that the rest of the market is setting.
Mm.
Cool. The perfect competition diagram is probably the most difficult to remember. The only reason for that is because there's a short run version and a long run version. That's what makes it hard.
Yeah, isn't it the short run version has the supply and demand, and then it shifts it has the line down to the right where it has the next diagram where
Yeah.
it's got the MC the the average cost is below the
Uh,
um
yeah,
oh yeah, it's below the
exactly.
DAR, demand equals average revenue line, and then the long run they're at the same point.
Exactly, you're right. So maybe while I draw it on here, you can try and draw it on paper as well. But otherwise you can just watch. So let's do it. So first you have to do one for the market and one for the firm. And you don't have to do this, but it depends on the question and what point you're trying to make. Remember, diagrams are always complementary. Unless it's like a draw a diagram question. If it's an essay, you don't want to be you have to use diagrams to complement your point. So sometimes your point might require two or three diagrams. Sometimes your point might not require a diagram at all. Okay. So let's do
Mm.
um supply and demand, which is a normal year 12 supply and demand, and it has this price. Now, the fifth characteristic was that firms are price takers. So this price should be taken by every firm in the market. Okay.
Mm.
So that would be my average revenue curve or my demand curve. Now, the next thing is that marginal revenue is always twice as steep as average revenue, and twice as steep of nothing is nothing. So the marginal revenue would follow the same path.
Mm.
Then we have an average cost curve like this, and the marginal cost curve going through the middle.
And the marginal cost has to go through the lowest point at the AC, right?
Exactly. And firms, even though they don't really make profit, they still try to make profit. And profit maximization happens at MC equals,
MR.
good. So that would be over here. So if I go down and then back up to my demand curve, that will be my price, and then that will be my quantity, and then that will be my cost. So I get some supernormal profit.
Mm.
If you have a long question where you have to discuss this, you can just draw the diagram, but make sure you explain a few things along the way.
Mm.
The first thing you need to explain that's unique about this graph is why average revenue is flat. Average revenue is flat because firms are price takers, which makes demand perfectly elastic
Mm.
because there are infinite substitutes, perfect substitutes. For example, if me and you both sell milk, if one of us tried to raise their price, the other one of us would get all of the demand. So that's why we both have to stick to the same price.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. The next thing is the transition from short run to long run. So this is short run. I can do long run on the same diagram, or I can do it on a separate diagram. So I'll show you here first. And then that's the thing you'd want to explain in your essay. So you'd say, because there are supernormal profits, what would happen?
Um, other firms will enter the market and copy exactly what they're doing,
Yeah.
and then all the
We can
supernormal
we can
profit will be
expand
gone.
even we can expand even more. We can say because there are supernormal profits and there is perfect information so other firms can see this. So it's visible for everyone to see. Then
Mm-hmm.
and because there's free entry and exit. Yeah, so it's because of all of these things together, right?
Mm.
So the supernormal profits, yeah. There's also perfect information, which means that people can see this. And there's free entry, which means firms can just join in without any hassle. So then new firms would enter, right?
Mm.
So then the supply curve shifts to the right. Okay. So
Mm.
the price that everyone has to accept decreases, and each firm's individual demand curve also decreases. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's the new price. Yeah.
Yep.
But this is where people often get confused. The diagram looks very complicated. So you're allowed to just draw, you can draw that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll just quickly show you. You can draw the diagram separately. So depending on what point you're trying to illustrate. So in the short run, you can just show that it's a bit below, so the supernormal profit. And then in the long run, you can just show they're all level. But the main thing is explaining what we just talked about a minute ago. So between here to here, what happens is that there's supernormal profit, there's free entry and exit, and there's perfect information. That means new firms join. So supply shifts to the right. That means each firm's individual AR curve, their demand curve shifts down because they get a smaller share of the total supply and the total demand. So they get a smaller share of customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you get confused, you can pick just the short run or just the long run or both in one or both as separate diagrams. Good. Next we have monopolistic competition. And this is defined by two things: free entry and exit, so no barriers to entry or exit, and slight product differentiation. So it's kind of similar to a perfectly competitive market, except there's some product differentiation. So now it turns into a more realistic market by one difference, the fact that there's some product differentiation. No one's coffee is the same, everyone's is slightly different.
Mm.
What we have to begin with is an outcome similar to a monopoly. So we have price, costs, revenue, quantity. I always start with my AC curve quite high up the page. And I have my MC through the middle. And then I make sure that I have my AR above it and my MR below it. I would make my AR quite elastic to be realistic to the fact that there's a lot of substitutes.
Mm.
My MR is twice as steep. Okay. MC equals MR here, which is the profit maximizing point. And then we go up to the price. Again, we have some supernormal profits. So the key point so far is MC equals MR. Some supernormal profits. And also just talking about why AR is relatively elastic. So we talked about how it's very perfectly elastic for perfect competition. So here we can just explain that it's quite elastic because of substitutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing happens again. So sometime later. So this is in the short run, and we go to the long run. What happens in the transition is the same thing. New firms enter due to free entry and exit, and they smell the supernormal profits. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So each firm's demand curve shifts to the left. Okay. So we have a new AR and a new MR.
And does that get rid of all supernormal profit in the market?
Exactly. And once again, I'm going to say the same thing again. It looks really messy and can confuse students to do it on the same diagram. And you're not really allowed to use, I don't know the rule, but I'm not sure if you can use different colors in your exam. So it would be best just to draw it again. There's no harm in doing that. It takes 5 minutes extra. I mean, 2 minutes extra. Okay.
Yep.
So price, costs, revenue, quantity, and you've got your AC, MC. Now we need to get this to touch. It can be anywhere as long as it touches on. It's a bit awkward. So I want it to touch the curve, right?
Mhm.
That's my AR. That's my MR. That shouldn't have been negative. And then we have MC equals MR and it goes up to this point. It's meant to be in line where it touches. It's kind of difficult. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's my P and it's also my C. So there's no supernormal profits at all. Okay.
Yep.
And then you can just explain why AR shifted. Okay. Cool. Um, the next one on the spec is oligopoly, but let's skip that and come back to that after. Let's do monopoly and then we can look at efficiencies in all of them. So the monopoly diagram is the same as what we just saw, but we don't have to do AR as elastic. So we've got AC, MC. Label your diagrams fully, but I'm going to be lazy and just put the pound sign.
Mhm.
And then you've got AR curve, but it's no longer elastic. Okay, AR, MR, MC equals MR over here. We go up. Now we've got a really high price, a really low quantity. That's what they always ask you. And a lot of supernormal profit. Okay. High price, low quantity. A monopoly is a sole seller. Okay.
Mm.
Well, that's a pure monopoly. When there's only one firm selling something in a market, but then you could also have monopoly power, which is just when a firm has more than I think 25%, is it?
Yeah, it's more than 25%.
Cool. And again, it's MC equals MR, but I think at this point we know that. Okay. Um, the bits to still cover for this section for Excel is oligopolies, and also within monopolies, they love price discrimination. I see it in a lot of papers. So we'll do that in a lot more detail in a second. And also natural monopoly and then monopsony. Okay. Before that, let's quickly go over efficiency. So at our chosen quantity, so Q1, are we at the bottom of the AC curve? Well, the bottom of the AC curve is here, so we're not productively efficient. Okay.
Mhm.
At our chosen quantity in this line of action, does MC equals AC? No. Sorry, does MC equals AR? No. MC equals AR here, so we should be at this quantity. So allocative efficiency, no. Does that make sense how I did that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you did it
Some people do
really
this
well.
funny thing, like I've seen students do that when they say MC equals AR here, so it's allocative. No, that's not the point. MC will obviously equal AR somewhere. It's about
Mhm.
does it equal at are we at that quantity? We're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But we are dynamically efficient. So monopolies are dynamically efficient because they're the only market structure, one of maybe oligopolies, but they're the main market structure which makes supernormal profit in the long run. Okay.
Mm.
That means there's enough profit to sustain and keep making improvements for reinvest. Yeah.
Mhm.
Perfect competition and monopolistic competition are not dynamically efficient. They only make supernormal profits here in the short run. Okay.
Mm.
One weird thing about monopolistic competition is they are not um so they're not dynamically efficient. Okay. Um does MC equals AR? And
Uh,
MC equals AR over here, so they're not
no,
allocatively
no,
efficient. Are they at the bottom of the AC curve? Nope.
no.
And in the short run, they're not as well. Nope. And nope. Okay. So monopolistic competition does not lead to productive, allocative, or dynamic efficiency. Okay.
Mhm.
But but this is the only uh monopolistic competition is a bit different. The last thing in this section um is called contestability. And contestability is another criteria to judge a market. So you can judge it on if it's dynamically efficient, productively efficient, allocatively efficient, and also if it's contestable. So contestability means there is hit and run competition in the market
What's
structure.
so they come in to make a bit of profit and then leave.
It's almost the opposite. So when there's profit, a new firm would join and try to make that profit, but in the end, they'll just end up lowering prices and make things cheap again. So
Mm.
every time there's profit, new firms join. You know how in perfect competition and monopolistic competition, the demand curve went down in the long run
Yeah.
because firms are making profit only in the short run.
Hmm.
That's what
Is it
hit
like that?
that's what hit and run
Oh,
competition is. And that's literally what it's a very simple thing, but it's a bit of a hidden subtopic. So many people often forget about this because monopolistic competition is none of these efficiencies, right? But it's actually, there's nothing really wrong with the market structure. It just doesn't hit these like on mathematically, but they're actually contestable because there's hit and run competition. And that means prices are going to be constantly lowered in the short run, in the long run.
mm.
Um, because so if anybody tried to overcharge and make a lot of profit, new firms would just join. So it works out quite well for consumers. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it incentivizes firms to be in the short run, which is okay. Incentivizes firms to try to get into the short run, which is not a time thing. It's a mindset thing. Short run means, hey guys, I've innovated. I've got a better product than yours, so I'm going to make some profit until one of you catches on. So that's actually a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So you can say that monopolistic competition is good because it's contestable.
Mm.
Lastly, in perfect competition, in the short run, are we at the bottom of the AC curve?
Um, yeah. Mm. The
We're here.
uh,
The bottom
no,
of
we're not
the
then.
curve is here, so we're not. Yeah. Does MC equals AR?
MC does not equal AR.
Yeah, it does.
Oh yeah, it
AR
does actually. Yeah.
AR is here and MC is there, so it does.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So in the short run, they're allocatively efficient. Okay.
Mm.
And in the long run, we're at the bottom of the AC curve and MC equals AR. So we're allocatively efficient and productively efficient. Okay.
Hmm.
So perfect competition is efficient in many, many ways. The only thing is it's not dynamically efficient. Also, perfect competition is contestable. Okay. The
Mm.
only thing is it's not is productively efficient in the short run because of X inefficiency, and they're not dynamically efficient because there's no supernormal profit in the long run. Is that okay?
Yep.
Good. So remember, when depending on the question, that's how you can evaluate if the market structure is good or if it needs changing or intervention. By talking
Yeah.
about the three main types of efficiency, so allocative, productive, and dynamic, but also about contestability. Contestability is like we don't need to use maths and like this equals this to say it's just common sense. It's just like a market's contestable if there's hit and run competition, if people can't just steal profits, if other people can join in too. And if this happens, the market's probably good. Cool. We don't need to do anything. It's literally a it's more of a common sense way of doing it. Okay,
Hmm.
cool. So an oligopoly is a market with a few firms.
Mhm.
The first thing I would always think about when I have an oligopoly question is it a competitive oligopoly or is it a collusive oligopoly? Because it can be both and it
Yeah.
depends on the context. So for example, Starbucks, Costa, Cafe Nero are a competitive oligopoly. And then a collusive oligopoly could also exist, maybe like with energy firms or other types of firms.
Okay.
And if the question, it like depending on which one, the question will be completely different.
Mm.
And for each of these, we should know their conduct, so like how they behave and their outcomes, like if it's good or bad for the firm and for customers.
Mm.
So if it's a collusive oligopoly, many, you have a few firms with similar size and similar prices, and there's just a few of them, and they are able to act as if they are one firm. Together, they will set high prices and low output. And overall, they will act as if they are a monopoly. So we'll learn about monopoly after, but if this was the case, you would literally just draw the monopoly diagram.
Okay.
And you would do the monopoly outputs as well, outcomes as well. So the high price and the low output and the profit maximization.
Mm.
Learn about monopoly. If it's collusive oligopoly, you just go down the monopoly route because you say firms colluding will act like they're a monopoly.
Okay, I got that. I got that.
Cool. So that's their outcomes. And in terms of their behavior, you would have you can say that there can be tacit collusion or overt collusion. So tacit collusion is, wait, 1 second. Okay, so tacit collusion is informal collusion,
Yeah.
and overt collusion is formal collusion, which is illegal. It's when firms actually agree on setting high prices, price fixing in the market, and keeping output low so that everybody has to pay a lot of money for their thing.
Mm.
Tacit collusion is informal, and it would be things like one of the slightly bigger firms raising their prices and other firms just copying them.
Mm.
Okay.
So tacit is informal, but overt is formal.
Yeah. And they would try and keep it a secret, but it would be illegal. Okay.
Yep.
Some of the behaviors in general for oligopoly firms is to try and drive firms out of the market so that there are only 2 or 3. Because an oligopoly can be 3 firms, or it could also be 10 firms. So
Mm.
there are some of these things. So sunk cost is completely normal. It's when a firm has paid a lot of money to start up a business and other firms can't compete with them instantly because that firm has invested so much already.
Okay.
But then these two are more like intentional. So limit prices is also legal. It's when you purposely set prices quite low so that it's profitable enough for you, but not profitable for someone new to start. And
Mm.
predatory pricing is technically it's illegal, but again, it's hard to even tell, but it is illegal. It's when you make a loss, so that it forces rival firms to quit because you can take the loss and the other firms can't. And then you'll be left as the only firm in the market, and then you'll have more monopoly power.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's the conduct. So overall, to summarize, first, when you have an oligopoly, you want to check, is the oligopoly a competitive oligopoly or a collusive oligopoly? And then you want to check the outcome and the conduct. In terms of conduct, you could see tacit or overt collusion. You could see predatory pricing or limit pricing. And you could see them acting, the 2 or 3 firms that are left, you could see them acting like a monopoly.
Okay.
Cool. On the other hand, if you have a competitive oligopoly, you will see nicer conduct. So you will see non-price competition. And you will see that they cannot really compete on price. So non-price competition is just common sense. It's things like advertising, branding, loyalty, discounts, customer service, and stuff like that. So when you know that you and your competitor have the same cost and the same price, you can try and attract customers just by providing good service. And
Okay.
that's what firms in a competitive oligopoly will do. So Starbucks compared to Costa.
Mm.
Cool. And the reason they can't compete on price is because if they were to lower the prices, what would happen? So if you were to lower your prices, what would your competitors do?
Would they lower the prices as well?
Exactly. So then there would be no benefit of lowering prices because both of you are just lowering your prices for no reason, right?
Mm.
And what about if you higher your prices?
To raise them, would it be negative because like other firms with prices lower than mine would obviously receive more customers?
Yeah, you would lose demand. So your competitors would gain market share because you raise your prices too high. So that's why firms in a competitive oligopoly don't compete on price. The question will never specify that it's a competitive oligopoly or a collusive oligopoly. So that's your job to either talk about both and evaluate, or to decide from the beginning which one you think it is based on the information they give you.
Oh, okay.
And the diagram for this is a monopoly diagram. The diagram for this is a kinked demand curve. The kinked demand curve is really simple. It's just a line that looks like, so price, quantity, and then that is the equilibrium.
Mm.
And it just illustrates the fact that prices are stuck at this point. And the reason is if they were to lower their prices to here, for example, they would barely get any extra demand because by the time they do it, other firms would also lower their prices. And if they were to raise their prices just a bit, they would lose so much demand because other firms would capture your demand because they're similar products.
Okay.
When you're evaluating this, just evaluate everything we do in Monopoly in the next lesson. When you're evaluating this, you can say that overall, it benefits customers because customers get to benefit from different types of advertising, loyalty, customer service, because firms are only allowed to compete on things apart from price.
Mm.
Cool. And then one more thing. And then yeah, so there's non-price competition. Okay. And the only thing that the government can do is to keep on trying to lower barriers to entry to ensure that collusive oligopolies turn into competitive oligopolies. So they
So that would
should
be like subsidies and that.
no, not even. It will just be things like laws and laws to allow firms to join, like like patents and stuff.
Yeah.
You want less things like patents because if there's a patent, then one firm can just control the market for a long time. So short patents mean that after a while, other firms can also try and copy and improve your product, which is good overall.
Oh, okay.
So stuff like patents and just laws, and competition policy. Yeah, just basically strong laws and penalties that if you find someone price fixing or colluding secretly, then there should be like big penalties for that. That's pretty much it. That's the main thing. Don't want too many mergers. We don't want too many firms dominating the market unless there's a reason for it.
Mm.
So the last thing with the kink demand curve, it proves that firms in an oligopoly are interdependent,
Yeah, got that.
both in competitive and collusive oligopolies. It just means that the behavior of another firm impacts the behavior of other firms and the outcomes of other firms in good and bad ways. And depending on the question, it's more just fun to understand, but I guess it's also good for your question, depending on what it is game theory and the prisoner's dilemma.
Mm.
So the prisoner's dilemma is basically the prisoner's dilemma is a situation where two people are caught for a potential crime,
Yeah.
and the idea is that they can either confess or remain silent. And the way it works is if they both remain silent, they both get 1 year. Like if they both don't, like if they both deny the crime happened and say nothing happened, they both get 1 year. If they both confess, they both get 5 years. If one of
Mm.
them confesses and the other one tries to deny it, then that person will get 20 years because the other person basically snaked them out
Mm.
and he got 0 years for confessing. And and obviously the vice versa as well. So the thing is they're in two separate rooms. What would they do if they were in two separate rooms and they couldn't talk to each other? If they had to pick if they had to either confess or deny?
You say, would they confess?
What would you pick?
I would confess in it because then it's like, do you think the other person would be like writing on you or telling on you? So you'd want to confess and tell them first, kind of
What
thing.
if your friend and you think that they'll remain silent, but you don't know, right? So overall, you do it this way. So you do it logically if you know the rules of the game. If you know that they're going to confess, what's better, 5 years or 20 years?
Right.
If you know that they're going to remain silent, what's better, 0 years or 1 year? Zero, right?
Mm. 1 year.
So
0 year. Yeah.
so you always confess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Logically. But then if the other person thinks the same way, what will be the outcome? 5 years each, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you both were able to talk to each other, then what would you pick?
Silent.
Exactly.
Mm.
So it proves that if oligopolies or people are allowed to communicate, they can pick the best overall outcome for each other. But then that's also bad because in an oligopoly, it could mean that they collude, and then that's bad for consumers because they'll set high prices and make a lot of profit, but that's bad for consumers.
Mm.
If you do want to talk about this, you can just describe it in words that the prisoner's dilemma is an example of interdependence in real life, where prisoners have to confess or deny a crime, and the outcome is better if they both were able to talk to each other. Or you
Wow.
can draw this with made up years.
Mm.
You can remember it, but that's quite difficult. So you could just talk about it in words. Overall, the conduct in a competitive oligopoly is non-price competition, and the outcome is interdependence and a fixed price, and a lot of non-price competition.
Mm.
Cool. That's it for oligopolies.